my international people. This is Louise Wacho on the You and I International Show. How are you doing? This is November 1st, 2011. It's a very interesting date for many cultures, so we are celebrating it. And it's Halloween in North America. So we are also wondering, what is Halloween about? That's the show today. What is Halloween? So we cannot talk about what is Halloween in just one show. It would take many shows. But for today, we have someone who is going to tell us what is Halloween in his own culture. And Halloween to me is an African born, free, means nothing. I don't understand it. I don't know what it's about. And this is precisely why we're asking someone who probably knows what it's about to tell us what it's about, because I've been to North America for a long time now, and they celebrate Halloween all the time, and I'm wondering if I should join Halloween or if I should come up with my own party. Yes, so that's the show. And then, of course, we have music for you. Ooh, great music. Here's a sample that you've heard. This is going to be like the music that we're going to be promoting this month from UA's production. It's like, whoa. Okay.
Hello.
Hello. How are you? So we were playing.
I'm very well. I'm very well. How are you doing?
Yes. So we have Dave McCallum on the show, and Dave is a writer, and he is an expert and a student of Celtic culture, right?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Well, I wouldn't know. I don't know if I'd say expert, but definitely a student. Lifetime student. I mean, my mother's family is from near Belfast, Northern Ireland, the best part, as we like to say. And my dad, the McCallum name actually comes from Scotland, and there's some Irish ancestry on my father's side as well. And, I mean, I've been to Ireland about 5 times in my life, and, you know, I actually took some university courses back in the day because I was interested and a lot of studying on my own. And I wouldn't say I'm fluent, but I know something of the Irish Gaelic language, and yeah, so
that's
here I
really
am.
great. You definitely know more about the Irish than I know.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think it's really important for everyone to, you know, connect with their roots, and I mean, I meet a lot of you know, white Canadians, and they'll tell me, oh, I don't know what my ancestry is. I'm just Canadian, and I just, you know, half the time I can take one look at their face and tell them that they're, you know, half Irish, half Scottish, or Welsh, or whatever. I mean, it's obvious when you know, and if everybody was more in touch with their roots, we'd have a better sort of understanding of where we come from and where we're going. And you know, that's very important. There's a good saying in Ireland. They say that you know, you may be finished with the past, but the past is definitely not finished with you. So
definitely not finished with us. That's why it's so interesting. So
definitely.
What is Halloween in Ireland? What is Halloween in your culture, in your ancient culture? Because I was telling people that as an African, I don't understand Halloween. I came here and I found Halloween, and you know, no one has told me what it's really about. So what do you know about Halloween?
Okay, well, Halloween, you know, probably most people don't know this, or some people know this. Halloween is actually originally specifically an Irish and by extension a Celtic festival. It the Celtic culture spread from Ireland into Scotland, and there are forms of this, probably in continental European culture and stuff. But anyway, just to be simple, some people may have heard this word, but the original name for Halloween is Samhain, and it's spelled Samhain. So some people tend to pronounce it Samhain and ridiculous stuff like that. But Samhain or Samhain, depending on your accent. Samhain is a very important, possibly the most important seasonal festival time in the Celtic calendar. Actually, and I have an excerpt here. I wanted to read this paragraph from this book I have called The Encyclopedia of Celtic Wisdom, which is by Caitlin and John Matthews, and it's actually quite a good book for people that are interested in sort of delving into Celtic culture. It definitely approaches it more from an insider's perspective, whereas a lot of the more scholarly books kind of tend to look at our culture in a sort of condescending way, let's say. But let me just read this paragraph to you.
Great.
To start this off. This is from a chapter called The Memory of the Ancestors from the Encyclopedia of Celtic Wisdom. So, Samhain marks the Celtic New Year and the beginning of the agricultural year. It was and is celebrated with great fervor. In ancient times, all of the fires of Ireland were extinguished and relighted from the one kindled upon the hill of Plaska. The festival is a long-surviving one. Not only has it recognizably survived as a popular folk custom within the Celtic countries, it has spread to America, obviously, as Halloween. But that is not all. The Celtic festival was also adopted as the basis for the Christian festival of All Souls. So the name Halloween means All Hallows Eve, or the night or evening of All Souls. And it's funny because I was thinking about this, but Samhain, oftentimes in the Gaelic language, you'll soften the first sound of a word. So Samhain would often be pronounced Hawen, which kind of sounds like Halloween, honestly.
Wow.
So Samhain was adopted as the basis for the Christian festival of All Souls, or Halloween. Saint Odilio of Cluny adopted it in the year 998. So we're working on 1,010 years or more. And this usage spread to the rest of the Western Christian world, possibly as an indirect result of the influence of Celtic monks who converted much of Europe, which is a whole other story in itself. Ireland was Christian long before most of Europe, and Christian long before the Catholic Church even existed. And it was Irish monks who actually brought Christianity to the rest of Europe. So, and also the Samhain has been augmented in more recent times by the additional celebration of Guy Fawkes bonfires and the remembrance of those who have died in war on Remembrance Day on the 11th of November. So in ancient times, the festival of Samhain would carry on for something like 3 weeks.
Wow.
It was the end of the harvest season. So as they mentioned, all of the fires in the entire island of Ireland would be put out. They would light a fire on the sacred hill of Plaska, actually the center of the Druids, which most people know of the Druids, but the Druids are the priests and wise people of the culture.
Yeah.
Of course, Druids were very, prestigious, and they had to be trained for at least 9 years. So it's not just not anybody could be a Druid. So anyway, so they would put out all the fires. The Druids would light a sacred fire on the hill of Plaska. Now, and Plaska is one of the great goddesses of Ireland as well. So they would light this fire, and then messengers would run around the island with torches, and everyone would have to kindle their hearth fire from one of these torches. So everybody's home fire was lit from this fire. And it was so important that, honestly, if anybody was caught lighting a fire, when the fires were extinguished, it was, basically punishable by death. I'm not saying This is cool. It's just what it was. And so a story that relates to that is that when St. Patrick, who was actually a Roman, believe it or not, came to Ireland to convert us all to Christianity, the first thing that he did was he went to the hill opposite the hill of Plaska, and on Samhain night, he lit a fire of his own. And so when the Druids and the king saw this other fire, they realized something was up. They ran over to see what was going on. There was St. Patrick. He had this great sort of magical, druidical battle with these guys, and eventually won them over. So, a huge part of our culture is the kind of transition between the pagan times and the early Christian times, which again were not under the Catholic Church. It was what was called the Celtic Church. It was much more closely related to, say, Ethiopian or Egyptian Coptic Christianity, that sort of thing. Strange as it may seem, the conversion to Christianity was generally seen as a good thing by most people because, as great as the old pagan days were, there was a whole lot of, well, not a whole lot of, but there was, things like, say, human sacrifice and all kinds of things going on that maybe weren't the best things. So that definitely relates to the whole festival of Halloween now, and I see that, the whole pagan spirit of the festival is what sort of comes through with people. So you get the whole concept of dressing up and, devils and demons and witches. Well, people would dress in order to disguise themselves, actually. And now, actually, another thing I was thinking I should mention is a very important reality in Ireland is that of She. Now, most people, don't think they know about She, but most people are aware of at least one of She, which is the Banshee. So She, the Banshee. So She actually refers to the or sometimes in English the fairy mound, and these are ancient earthwork structures from 4,000 to 8,000 years ago that were ancient temples and burial grounds and this sort of thing. And these mounds themselves are called the She. And the people of the mounds are called the Danashi, or in English they're called the good people. People tend to want to refer to them in a positive way. In English they're called the fairies. Now the word fairy does not in any way give justice to the She. The She are not, they can be small, they can be large, they can look exactly like, they are the people of the other world. And at one time they were actually living people. They come from a tribe called the Tuigi Dana, which means the tribe of the goddess Dana. And they built these fairy mounds, and eventually they decided to depart from the human realm and live entirely in the world of the She. So Banshee literally means woman of the She. Ban is a woman, so Banshee is a fairy woman. So the most important thing is that during the time of Samhain, this is the time that, as they say, the veil between the worlds of the living and the dead and this world and the other world are at their thinnest. And the She walk among us, basically. And there are places where there are what are called the fairy trackways, and these are like ancient roads and pathways, and sometimes the She will have a march. They will, have a procession, like a parade. And many people have seen this. This is something in Irish culture that persists to this day and will never go away, because it's not just something that people believe in. This is a reality. And a good story, here's a good Halloween story, actually, to chill your blood a little bit. This is a true story. A good friend of mine just told me this a couple of days ago. He's an older Irishman from the South, and he had just been over there visiting and telling me all about the terrible economic collapse and all that stuff, but he dropped this little gem on me, which is a true story. I need to look it up in the internet. Apparently everyone in Ireland has heard of this. Within the last year, at Shannon Airport, which is one of the biggest airports in Ireland, they had planned to build an extension to one of the runways. Now, the extension was planned such that it would cut through one of these She, or these fairy mounds.
Oh,
now, they could not get one man from the whole of Ireland who would even consider working on this pathway. Not the most cynical, modern, whether Christian or atheist, nobody would work on this. Not one person from Ireland. They couldn't pay them enough to do this. So what did they do? They went over to Wales. They went across the water to Wales, and they hired a whole crew of workers, and they brought them over to do the work. Well, funny thing, the Welsh have their own very similar Celtic culture. They believe in the fairies, and they have their own name for it. But anyway, I guess they figured it wasn't their land, so they could get away with it. So they came over to Ireland. They worked for about a month. They created this runway. They dug right through the She, and everything was fine, seemingly. And on their last night, they had a big drunken party. Everybody got all wasted and hooting and hollering and had a great old time. And then they got on the plane the next morning, all 20 or so of them, and the plane took off for Wales and has never been seen of since. And they have no idea what happened, and the entire plane was lost. So, true story, happened this year. Yep. About 20 or so guys.
The entire plane has disappeared.
The entire plane completely disappeared. They have no idea what happened to it.
Until today.
Yep. And this was this year. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And CNN has not told us.
So you don't mess with the She. You do not mess with the She, as they say. The Irish fairies are nothing to mess with. They may bless you, but they're more likely to wreak terrible havoc on you and your family if you dare to interfere with their homes or places, and so that's a very important part of the whole Samhain festival is this presence of the Sidhe, and
wow.
the
That's
reason for
really,
people originally pretty heavy story. Eh? So that's why people would dress up.
I wish I could make a request to the Sidhe to come and kidnap someone. So we can
well, you don't necessarily want to do that because then you would owe them something, and that's the last thing you want to do is be in debt to the Sidhe because they will collect. And yeah, so I mean, there's plenty of stories of you hear stories about people falling asleep, say, on one of these mounds, and they go inside and they meet people and they sing and dance and feast, and they come out and they think it's only been a night and it's been a year. This is a pretty common sort of theme. So, and the whole thing with people dressing up on Halloween really comes from people wearing masks and costumes to disguise themselves, because with the Sidhe able to cross over and walk among the living, it was important for people to be able to disguise themselves so as not to be, caught by the Sidhe or seen to be a living person. And a lot of the stuff like, say, the jack-o'-lantern apparently originated in Scotland. And funny enough, most people would have no idea what the original jack-o'-lantern was made out of because, of course, in old times, the pumpkin is a New World vegetable, so we didn't have pumpkins up until about the 1400s. So what do you think that the original jack-o'-lantern was carved out of?
Out of something that grows in Europe?
Yeah. What's the biggest vegetable we could have got our hands on?
Oh, my God, I have no clue.
It was a turnip. The original jack-o'-lanterns were carved out of turnips.
Turnip?
So, yeah.
What is that? I don't even know which one is that.
It's like a big root vegetable,
Oh, okay, I see.
Turnips, yeah. They're kind of white and purple, sour tasting. So, yeah, the original jack-o'-lanterns were carved out of turnips, and that, it's there's a bit of both in that. They're kind of to scare away the evil spirits, and to also the lights and candles were to draw in good spirits, because the flip side of Samhain, of course, is that with the veil being thin, anybody that wishes to make contact, say with a relative or a friend that has passed over, or just to make contact with the other world in order to maybe gain some knowledge about, their future path, or what was going to happen in the coming year, or to get some kind of advice, then they could consult with the druids, or some people were able to do it on their own, and they could get advice on Samhain, because the wisdom of the ancestors in the other world would be there. So, yeah. Actually, here's a little story about that.
People don't have to dress up as devils. It seems to be that the theme is just scary and devils. People,
yeah,
is that who they're trying to contact? Is that who they're hiding from? I don't really understand the fake bones. I mean, how can people have graveyards? I mean, there's a real war happening out there with real bones and real dead people. And then I walk around in my neighborhood and it's fake dead people. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Why does it?
Well,
what's up with that?
I think, on one hand, people have taken it to this point where it's a little meaningless, and it's just a way for them to dress up and party and get wasted on the one hand, right? And then the scary side of Halloween, I think in a way it's always been there, because, it is a time when people, especially in northern countries, the winter is starting, it's getting cold, the plants are dying, the animals are going to sleep. The presence of death in nature is very real, and it's a time to address that on a personal level and accept it and make peace with death as a part of life in a wholesome way, say. Now, the flip side of that is that, people dwelling on the ghoulish, ghosts and goblins and zombies and stuff, they want to kind of scare themselves because maybe they don't have that reality in their life, and, people's lives can be a little shallow nowadays, so they don't necessarily think of the connection with that. And for example, I live on Commercial Drive, and there's been this big thing in the news lately, this store Mintage. They had a Halloween display. It was totally inappropriate. It displayed like this bedroom scene where there'd obviously been a murder taking place, and there's a bloody dress on the wall, and it was just disgusting. It wasn't even like a Halloween display. It was just like a bad movie setup, and a lot of people reacted, and thank God they took it down. Their apology was a little weak, but I just thought, the thing is that, and a lot of people made this point, yeah, I mean, people are walking past this every day. The reality in Vancouver with, the missing women's tribunal is going on right now. This is a reality in our city. Women are being murdered. It's very disturbing, and for them to portray that to people was just absolutely disgusting and totally unacceptable. But also I see that, some people that aren't, I don't think they can't be aware that these things are happening in Vancouver, because everyone's aware. You can't even not hear about this, but they're not really addressing it on a personal level and not feeling the depth of what's going on. So in a way it comes out subconsciously that they kind of fetishize this whole murder, killing, death, zombies. You watch TV nowadays and you get that any hour of the night or day, 7 days a week. You can watch, shows where there's basically autopsies and, serial killers, and it's just, people have this obsession with this now because it's occurring in our society, but they don't necessarily have any relationship with it, so they're trying to address it in their own way. And I just think, people are really immature about this stuff. They don't realize that, say, people are here from other countries and that have direct experience with war and violence, and people are experiencing that here, so they don't realize that these images really do affect other people in that kind of way. So personally, I think my feeling of Halloween this year, I didn't get into it at all. I didn't dress up. I didn't go out because I felt like it really struck me this year that, at one time this was probably the most sacred time of year for my ancestors, and it was a time to really seriously consider, life, death, the other world. Mm-hmm. And it's not a time to trivialize that, and it's not a time to just get wasted and go out and party and hoot and holler and stuff. It's, so I spent time with the people that I care about, and, I watched a few scary movies, but nothing too freaky, And so I didn't really get into it, and I feel like it really has been commercialized in such a way that I don't really want anything to do with the mainstream Halloween, because, and talking to you the other day, it really struck me that, people are coming from other countries seeing this, and it makes no sense to them. Why do these people need to do this? Why do they dress up like this? And when you think about, say, the Mexican Day of the Dead, there's much more of a sense of humor about it. It's colorful. There's skeletons, yes. Portraying skeletons is kind of, what do they call that? A memento mori, like remember death. That enjoy your life because it's a fleeting moment, and it's not like a scary kind of thing,
Yeah.
I think there's a healthy way.
If this is the time for people to communicate with the other world, and if you want to communicate with the other world, which may actually be a positive influence to you, don't you want to communicate with the positive world instead of communicating with the evil world? Because it seems to be that the evil world is what people are trying to communicate with.
Yeah. And it does seem like that just on observing it. And I think the thing is that because people's North American culture is just not very deep, and people are not really taught to analyze these things deeply. And all the information that I've said about Samhain and Celtic culture, I could go on for hours, but you can find that stuff with 2 clicks on the internet or go to your library. All this information is right there. You don't even have to dig very deep, but people aren't encouraged to dig. They're not encouraged to look for the roots of things. They're just encouraged to take things as they are and go with it. And I think with that, and especially, most people that you'd ask, that belief, like I say in Ireland, where, everybody believes, doesn't even believe. They know the Shia are real. They know that spirits are real. They live with it every day. They have a certain level of respect for it. And nobody in their right mind would mess with that. Whereas here, people are raised to believe this is all just, hocus pocus, and it's all superstition, and we let go of that generations ago. So just have fun and enjoy yourselves. Well, if you don't really think about these things deeply, I think that people are drawn to a dark side, because in any society or situation when people don't look for their roots and don't dig deep, they get drawn into, dark, destructive things. It's empty. And then it becomes dark because they're looking for this feeling of excitement or something, and that's where they get it. And it's just,
excitement, empty excitement leads to more emptier excitement. How did kids get involved into this, and candies? Who got the kids in the ancient times? Did you have kids go into every house asking for food, asking for candies?
I think, honestly, I think that does have an origin in kids dressing up. and then going, they would dress up as spirits, as I said, in order to deceive the spirits, and then they would go house to house, asking for favors. And yeah, there was a lot of mischief and stuff, that you can't deny that that's a part of the culture too, that, people would go out and they would play tricks on each other and they would do all kinds of silly stuff, and, mostly in good fun. But the thing with the masks and stuff too, I was really thinking this year that, yeah, I mean, I'm positive, I don't have the information to prove this, but I'm personally positive that in our ancient culture we had some type of masked performances and dances, much like the native cultures of the West Coast here, with portraying different spirits, and people would put on a mask and then they would take on the characteristics of that spirit. This is even more common in Africa.
Yeah.
And it's a way to channel these presences into the community and have people kind of deal with it, and then, and then it's gone. And so I think there is a root to that, but I think it was all a lot more, when these same practices, if they're kind of, within the context of a culture that understands, spirituality and understands, has a healthy relationship with life and with death and with the other world, then, this has a much deeper meaning. But if it's just a shallow, superficial, dress up, go around looking for candy, it's just,
Yeah. It's really
there's not much to it. So, yeah.
I mean,
you think about,
yeah.
You think about, say, the witches. That's what used to be one of the most popular Halloween costumes, was ghosts and witches. And you think of, well, why? What is the story of the witches in Europe? And I mean, witch is an English word. I mean, but any of the wise people, the healers, herbalists, and also people like druids, people with sacred knowledge, would have been classified as witches. And I mean, they were all exterminated in our culture by the Christians, whether converted or physically annihilated. There was a genocide of our sacred culture, so that was lost, and people are trying to reconnect with that, because even seeing Walt Disney, all these witches and all these dragons and goblins and all this sort of thing, and all of these have very deep roots in European culture, and especially in Celtic culture. But if you don't look to the root of it, and you just get that superficial image, then it's just kind of like, oh yeah, the scary witch and scary ghost, and there's a much deeper meaning behind all these things. Basically, I was just thinking of one story, which is a very typical Irish story about Samhain, and like I was saying, people getting prophecies and visions of the future. Okay, so here's, just to be brief. So my name is David James McCallum. In Gaelic, or Ascoilga, my name is Dahi Seamus Macielachullen, okay? And Dahi comes from an ancient king of Connacht in the west, and his name was Dahi. And his real name was actually Feradach, but they called him Dahi, which means the swift, because he was the fastest at putting on his armor. Whenever there was a battle, he'd have his armor on and he'd be ready to go right away, right? So at Samhain, he consulted with the Druids, and, he had a feeling that there was some kind of prophecy of his future, and so he consulted with the Druids, and they said, well, King Dahi, what you need to do is you need to get your army together and sail across to Europe and go to Switzerland, and when you get, and, conquer all the way, and once you get to Lake Geneva in Switzerland, then your destiny will meet you at Lake Geneva in Switzerland, okay? So, of course, Dahi, next day gets up, gets his buddies together, they form a war band, they get a boat, they get everything together, they sail across, they make their way across Europe over several months, they're just, raiding and pillaging and being total bastards the whole way. And when they finally make it to the shores of Lake Geneva, Dahi jumps out of the boat, gets on shore, sticks his sword in the ground, and all of a sudden he's hit by lightning and killed instantly.
Whoa.
So there you go. So that was the prophecy, was that, you'll meet your destiny on the shores of Lake Geneva, and he sure did. So
whoa,
my namesake.
Whoa. But I'm sure he did not expect his destiny to be death, lightning, nothing.
And that's the point, is that when you're asking for advice from the other world, it's going to be true, but it's not necessarily going to be what you want, So the point is to be very careful when you're dealing with these forces, right? So
yeah, definitely, because they're not going to give you the whole picture as they see it.
Yeah.
they're only gonna give you. I've realized that the fortune tellers give you, what they think you can handle.
Yeah.
Like they were not gonna tell him that you're gonna go to Geneva and then get killed right there.
No. They might not even have known that he would get killed. They might have just seen that something great was going to happen to him. They're just intermediaries, for the other world that's actually telling them and stuff. So yeah, I think that's why I mean.
Who destroyed this ancient culture that you had?
Well, I would say it wasn't so much, over time destroyed, but it was kind of a slow, ongoing process that really started, with, St. Patrick and the Christianity, which came around the year, I think, 400. Mm-hmm. Although, as they say that, we had already had some Christian teachings from the people they call the Desert Fathers who came from Ethiopia and Egypt. By around the 400s, Ireland was fully Christianized. So a lot of the more sort of lurid pagan elements of the culture, like I mentioned, human sacrifice was a big thing that was ended. Animal sacrifice was ended. The worship of multiple gods and goddesses and idol worship, all these things were ended. Although a lot of things persisted, like a lot of the druidical knowledge, like not necessarily fortune telling, but things. The ability to see visions and to tap into that world was still a part of the culture. And then in the 900s, I think, there was what was called the Council of Nicaea. Anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of the timeline. So in the 900s was when the official Roman Catholic Church was established, and at that time they basically clamped down on all of these sort of what they saw as frivolous elements in and also these elements in Celtic culture that they just couldn't deal with. For example, not only could the priests in Celtic culture marry and have children, but also women could be a part of the church. They could be ordained as priests, and obviously this wasn't happening for the Roman Catholics, so that was ended pretty quickly. And what they managed to do, like in a lot of other countries, was to cover the pagan culture with a blanket of Catholicism. So every single one of the holy places was basically renamed and reconsecrated as a Christian place, and all of the old gods and goddesses were basically renamed as saints. So, for example, Saint Bridget, Saint Michael. Bridget was one of the greatest goddesses of the Celtic people, and she was sort of portrayed as a Christian saint and as a living person and this kind of thing. So there's a very slow erosion over time, and then, of course, around the year 1000, then the Vikings start coming in. And the irony with that, of course, is that whereas the Irish had Christianized England and much of the Viking lands, the Vikings were still pagans, and they worshipped Odin and Thor and, these gods of war and violence. And so they came to Ireland, to an already Christian country, and started setting up their camps and their towns, such as Dublin, and they, basically moved around the land, extorting and brutalizing the people. And there was a great battle at Clontarf in 1060 something. It was around 1066, which was the big one in England, but where King Brian Boru fought off the Vikings, but was then killed by a Viking. And so, basically there was the occupation from about 1000 on, with first the Vikings and the Danes, and then the Anglo-Saxons and the basically the English, who not only colonized but took over Ireland as a colony. By the 1400s, they're basically prohibiting the language. By the 1600s, they had what was called the Penal Code, in which it was illegal to speak Irish. It was illegal for an Irish person to own land. It was illegal to own a knife. It was illegal to own a horse. You could be shot on sight for wearing anything green. So,
wow.
There was, by about the 1600s, there was a very deliberate genocide which went on for, hundreds of years. There you go. So,
I can't believe
we're still here.
As Africans, because, we've been at war with these things for ages now. Mm-hmm. It's always, it's like the Europeans were doing this kind of things among themselves way back. What do you think is the ingredient that makes you enemies with the English?
Well, the thing is that, prior to that, I mean, the kind of sad thing, but the true thing is that, I love my people, but, we're kind of crazy. And anybody that's of Irish descent and has been to Ireland will tell you that, it validates a lot of things because, unfortunately, in some cases stereotypes come from reality. And, on the one hand, let me put it to you this way. I see us as a very bipolar people. On the one hand, we are the drunken, savage, brawling morons that we're portrayed to be. And on the other hand, we're the most brilliant poets, scientists, musicians, artists that, possibly the world has ever seen. So you have both elements mixed together in one people. And as they say, like, if the Irish don't have an enemy to fight, we'll just fight each other, which is what's been going on in Northern Ireland for, 500 years now anyway, which is where my family's from. And it's still going on. I mean, this summer, the riots between the Catholics and the Protestants in Belfast were at an all-time high. It's just ridiculous. And you could say it's over religion. You could say it's over class. But really, I don't know. I think part of us just likes to fight. It really does. And then the flip side of that, of course, is that the English, being Vikings, they're Teutonic, they're Germanic people, and it's almost like in Northern and Western Europe, there's really two nations. I mean, there's the Celtic people and there's the Germanic people, and our languages are different, our cultures are different, and our whole mindset is very different. You know what I mean? So you kind of get the clash of opposites. You know what I mean? And at the best of times, we inspire and feed off each other, and intermarry and have great kids. And at the worst of times, there's no no common ground. So you still.
And where do the French come into this?
Well, funny thing, the French are a Celtic nation as well. They were the nation of Gaul, they originally spoke a Brittonic Celtic language, which is related to Welsh, and they were very, very deliberately crushed by Julius Caesar and his followers. Julius Caesar, for whatever reason, had a real big problem with Celts, and he just hated our guts. And his life's mission, honestly, was to see the total eradication of the Druids and the Druid religion and way of life, because all of the Celtic people paid homage to the Druids, and Druids were completely exempt from any type of military service, or, they would never even carry a weapon because nobody would even think of attacking a Druid. So Julius Caesar, they marched into Gaul. They turned it into a Roman province. Within a few hundred years, they were speaking a form of Latin, and the rest is history, as they say. Now you have France. And so, I don't know if they still have some vestige of Halloween or Samhain still going on there, but...
I think they're just copying the Americans now.
Yeah, this is the thing, is it's come so far that it's gone from what was originally an Irish-Scottish holiday that was then carried to North America in its current form, and then has spread from there as kind of North American holiday, much like, modern Christmas or, Valentine's Day or any of these things where it's very commercialized and all that kind of thing. But,
so
as I said, there's always the root.
How would you like to see the Halloween of the future? What do you see Halloween in the future? Like next year, now that you will have had time to think about its true meaning, what kind of Halloween would you like to see in the future?
That's a good question. Personally, I've decided personally that I can't really. Honestly, I love a good Halloween party. I used to love to dress up and go and drink and dance and have a good old time. And maybe if the feeling was right, I could still get into that. But, this year it just really struck me that, as I said, this was once a very sacred and solemn time of the year. And it's personally, honestly, not to get too into it, but I've had a few people in my family and, circle pass on within the last year or so. And, my thoughts kind of turned to that. And so I'd like to see people, address the roots of the festival, and I'd like to see people have a little bit more reverence for what it's all about, and I'd definitely like to see people have a little bit more responsibility about some of the sort of more offensive things that people do. And I'm not a touchy person by any means. I don't get easily offended, but like I said, the thing at the shop, Mintage on the Drive, just really kind of got me going, and it's more just the total obliviousness that even their apology, it was like, oh, well, we're sorry we offended you. That was not our intention. And it's like, that's not an apology, really. An apology is saying, we're sorry we did wrong. We won't do it again. We realize that this was very offensive, and, and not like, oh, I'm so sorry we offended you. So, yeah, I'd like to see people have more reverence around it. I'd like to see maybe it be a time for people to reflect on conflict and on the troubles that are going on in our own society right here, right now, because November 11th, Remembrance Day, is right around the corner, and now a lot of people have a hard time with that because they have a hard time with the military, and as do I. But Remembrance Day at least is supposed to be a solemn occasion to observe the passage of those who have died fighting for us to be here. And the current state of wars is not necessarily something that most people will agree with. So maybe Halloween could be more a time to give reverence to those that have passed on from whatever circumstance,
and
a time to.
I had someone who told me that they wanted to have like a Gaddafi costume, but then they couldn't have a Gaddafi costume because maybe someone would be like, "Oh, you look like a terrorist," but then he's dead, and that's real life. And that's real Halloween happening. And, we have like fake death in our society. We are faking death over here while we are actually at war. Canada is bombing Africa right now.
Yeah.
So we are actually we're like causing other people to live a real Halloween while we are faking Halloween over here,
Death. And that's the thing. It's just like, if people... Unfortunately, with people, if they're not directly affected by conflict, war, and violence, most people like to just ignore it, bury their heads in the sand, and say, well, I just don't like to think about that. And that to me is a very dangerous attitude, and it's, and it's very immature. And people need to admit that the current state of the world politically and socially and economically is we're at our lowest point as a species right now. I'm not just saying that. I really firmly believe that in the course of our evolution, like this is pretty much as bad as it's ever gotten if you really look at the planet. Which isn't to say that we're all bad. It means that we have an opportunity to prove that we're better than this, I'd like to see more reverence in all of life for people to have respect.
Like we'd rather party some more to forget that we're actually in this bad shape.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right?
I was downtown. Did you go downtown Vancouver this weekend? It was crazy.
I kind of avoided it, to be honest, because I live on Commercial Drive, and I kind of got enough on the drive. So
Saturday night was madness. I'm telling you, madness.
Yeah.
All kinds of people, all kinds of costumes, and it's like, wow. It's the second most grossing holiday now, like $6 billion or something. I was hearing ridiculous figures. After Christmas, it's Halloween.
Yeah. I looked at it this way too. Say, look at the Canucks riot, right? Like, even if people think Vancouver, it's the this slogan, BC, the best place on earth, which is ridiculous, by the way. But Vancouver is the best city ever. Well, if people are willing to tear the city to pieces and burn cars because they lost a hockey game, it shows you that there is some deep tension under the surface, and people are just waiting for a chance to go crazy, and they're just waiting for a chance to get wasted in the streets and wild out and go nuts because, like it or not, they're very repressed, and they're not expressing these things in a healthy way in their life, and they don't have a real, mature relationship with their society, and they don't feel any responsibility towards it. So I feel like we are kind of at a boiling point here, and the reason why Halloween has gotten so big is because it's a time when people are allowed to just let loose and, blow off some of that steam, which is healthy. It's really healthy for people to be able to, scream and yell and get all carried away and stuff if it's, in a context that,
Do you have fireworks in your neighborhood? We have fireworks. I'm hearing, like, crackers.
That really, this really struck me this year, too, because I'm from Northern Ontario, honestly, and it really has struck me this year and the last few years with Halloween, the firecrackers. Now, when I was a kid, where I grew up, there are no firecrackers at Halloween. None. both because, I mean, I don't know about now, but, there used to be laws in Ontario. You couldn't sell most of that stuff. It was illegal. And on the other hand, it just wasn't a part of Halloween. I mean, Halloween was supposed to be dark and scary and spooky, and firecrackers just kind of blow the whole vibe. It's loud and banging and this and that, and it's just kind of like, well, how is it supposed to be?
There's banging,
scary and dark, right?
I'm like, yo, who's bombing Canada, man? Tell me.
Yeah, I know.
Is NATO intervening in Canada or something?
Oh yeah. I don't understand the firecrackers at Halloween. It's just not. It's never been a part of it for me. So, yeah. But I guess that's what it is here. But I was thinking about it too. Like it's like saying in my understanding, like in Chinese culture, like a Chinese New Year, they light off all the firecrackers because those are meant to actually scare away the spirits and the devils and demons and stuff, right? And I was thinking, well, but it's Halloween, You're not supposed to scare them away. We're supposed to be scared of them, Like it's not.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
So do you think
I don't know. It's
someone who really knows what it's about is actually doing the right thing. They're scaring our spirits away by doing all these superficial things.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But we're not gonna change how people celebrate Halloween here. I just, the best I can do is to tell people about the origin of it, think and study more into, what people used to do, and find my own way of embracing that and respecting it, because, like it or not, and admit it or not, like this, it relates to this particular time of year and the energies, not just of the seasons, but of where the Earth is in its rotation of the sun, and what stars are affecting us now, and constellations. And that was, not just in an intellectual way, but the actual feeling of the knowledge of these energies and how they affect us at this time, and how to effectively channel that. And like I said earlier, like this is, it's the end of the harvest season.
Yeah.
But in the Celtic calendar, this is the beginning of the year, right? The year doesn't begin in January. It doesn't begin in the spring. It begins now, it's kind of like beginning at the ending. So right at the point when, the grass stops growing, the leaves have fallen off the trees, and, the animals are all going into their caves and stuff, that's when the year starts, So it's time to cut away, all the unnecessary things in life, and really get deep into yourself and really think about what's important, which is kind of what I did this year, so.
That's great.
So there you go.
I think that's what we're going to do in the future. I'm starting a new Halloween party, a new Halloween tradition. I'm going to be contacting my own people. As of tonight, I'm contacting my own people and asking them, and I'm going to give them a list of people to kidnap.
Sounds good.
I'm going to investigate further into this plane that has disappeared, but nobody has said anything about it.
Yep. Check it out. Shannon Airport.
Yeah, can you imagine? So.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for.
Hey, no problem. I'm sorry. I'm kind of running out of time because honestly, like I mentioned to you before, I'm going down to visit a good friend of mine in hospital, so that's a good thing to do.
Thank you so much for being on
visit
the show.
Sick. Hey, no problem. And if I may, just to end off, I was thinking that I actually wanted to say this little piece in Gaelic, in Irish, just to end off, and it's kind of like a prayer. Yes. So I'll say it once in Irish, Asquelga, and then I'll say it once in English, and then I'll say it once more in Irish, just so you get the gist, okay?
Okay.
You ready?
Yes.
Okay. This is called Altu Paganach, which means a pagan prayer, all right? So it goes like this. Ilahara mamunchire shir gajivis nabaha, vienash na nyeha, agus na noinyeha, in almost a hele, ol war na quirnia, gaumbuechas, rov mochoj. Okay?
Nice.
Which in English is, it means in the presence of my people or my neighbors, back to the beginning of life, in the presence of the gods and the ungods, in homage to the immense generosity of the universe, I give thanks for my own share. Okay?
Wow.
So I'll say that again in Irish now, just so you can hear the real deal, okay? Elahara mamunchire shir gajidis nabaha, vienash na nyeha, agus na noinyeha, in almost a hele, ol war na cruinya, Gaumbuachas, Rove Mahoij. There you go. Shinawich.
Wow.
That's it. So
Well,
magic threes. Everything has to happen in three, right?
Thank you.
Hey, no problem. No problem. And Banach live, Swantror, and I will be talking to you very soon.
All right. Have a great
Yeah, have a great night. Okay, bye now.
Yes, people. So you heard about the Irish version of this whole story of Halloween. So if anybody else has their own version of Halloween, they can let me know. But we didn't have Halloween when I was growing up in Africa, and now I know for sure that we did have a celebration of our ancestors. That's for sure. So now we gotta find out when and how to have our own celebrations, because the time to follow everything and everyone and anything that just comes just because it's fun, party, celebration, that time, I mean, that's not what we were trying to do. So if that's what you're into, happy party, but we're trying to party in another way. So that's the show today, and so I will leave you with our great music from our future ancestors. Thank you very much.